Hi, welcome to École Chocolat's Chocolate Masters Hangouts. We're so excited to be getting together and talking about chocolate. What could be better?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hartman. Welcome to our Chocolate Masters Hangouts. Today we bring together successful regional chocolatiers from all over the Americas. I'd like to welcome Rachaels from Cocoa Nymph in Vancouver, Canada. Giorgio De Marini from Rosalind Chocolatier in Lima, Peru.
Hi.
Amy Jo Pedone from Valenza Chocolatier in Costa Mesa, California.
Hi.
Hello. And Rick Jordan from Rick Jordan Chocolatier in St. Louis, Missouri.
Hello.
For those of you who are watching live on Google+, you can actually enter questions and we will get to those at the end of the program today. We're having a conversation about chocolate ganache and creating the ultimate chocolate truffle. And simply put, chocolate ganache is an emulsion of chocolate and cream that is the basis of the chocolate truffle. And as a fun fact to start our day off, legend goes that the discovery of the ganache was actually an accident. Sometime in the late 19th century, a busy French chef poured warm cream into a bowl of chopped chocolate instead of pouring it into a pitcher. And there was no way that he could separate the cream out of the chocolate, so he mixed the two and he loved the result. But because it is a very soft mixture, he came up with the idea of rolling them up into balls and covering it up with cocoa powder to seal in all that goodness. And the result looked like a fungus black truffle, so that's the reason for the name truffle. So today I want to start with a round table of questions. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then each one of our panelists is going to take turns in replying to these questions. So first of all, I'd like to know how you came about the first successful truffle recipe that you've developed, how this recipe has changed over time, how you've adapted it, and also what is the base recipe that you use in your ganache and that you use when you develop new flavors and recipes, and if there's a specific ratio of cream to chocolate that you like to use and that works for you. So Amy Jo, if you want to kick us off.
After I finished my professional The Chocolatier program in 2011, I actually went up to Cocoa Nymph and spent a good almost 2 weeks with Rachael. And coming back from there, I really developed more of the science behind it. Where I think during the class part, I didn't quite understand it as much. So when I came home, I really took away basically my ratios and looking at it when I'm looking at dark chocolate versus milk and white, starting with like a 2-to-1 ratio with my liquefiers, or a 2.5 to 1 with white chocolate and milk chocolate. So for me, all of my products either have an Italian ingredient or cookie recipes and making them ganache flavors. So basically from kind of that general ratio, I went and said, okay, I really love Spumoni ice cream. Spumoni ice cream has 3 main flavors: pistachio, amaretto, and dark chocolate. So there I started basically like, well, how can I blend these two? So first, I developed just a basic dark chocolate ganache flavoring with alcohol with amaretto, and then sticking in pistachio. And then I noticed how you're adding nuts to it, how that can change over time in your shelf life. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to play around with 2 levels in my bonbon. So I ended up doing a white and then the second layer is the amaretto dark chocolate. So, that has been a truffle that's evolved over time, but I think it all goes back to the basics. For me, it's really at the science of, your fats and your liquefiers to the specific chocolate type that you're using.
Giorgio, how about you?
Well, okay. My first creation was the Chile limo bonbon. I worked with this ingredient that is typical from Peru, and for that time, it was the first bonbon created with a spicy ingredient. So for me, it was like a new experience, very risky because in Peru, okay, nobody is used to eat those type of chocolates. And I launched it to the first Salon of Cacao y Chocolate here in Peru in the year of 2010. And okay, I was waiting the customers to, okay, what's going to happen next? So when I put it in sale, uh, well, people were asking, what is this? No, what is this? This is a new flavor. Is this too spicy or not? So I have to explain customers how was the ganache made and how they're going to feel it. No, so I decided working with this ingredient because here in Peru we have a very traditional dish called ceviche that is made with fish, is made with the Chile limo and lemons. But instead of lemons, I use orange juice. So I only use the Chile limo and the lemons, not the lemons, but the orange, and make the ganache. And the result was incredibly great because you can feel the spicy of this ingredient, of this Chile limo, and also you can feel like a citrus note of the orange. And I also made it with a milk chocolate shell in the outside and hand painted with red color and orange and tried to resemble that ingredient. And for me, it was a very good experience. And everybody loved it here. And here is one of my best sellers in Peru.
Wow. And how about the ratios that you work with and the base for
this ganache, I made I make a ratio of 2:1. I use bitter chocolate for the ganache, and it's made with cream and the orange juice, a sweetener, and the Chile limo in an infusion.
Okay. Rachel, how about you?
Well, my first ganache recipe was totally stolen. I make no bones about this. From a Bon Appetit magazine. It was before I did any chocolatier training. It was the gateway drug for me. It was the first truffle I made. I bought a magazine. I made a truffle. I shared it with my friends. They asked me to make more. I said, no, I'm not a businesswoman. I'm never going to sell these chocolates. And the next year I did. I sold chocolates because I was desperate for money, and that was the only recipe I had at the time. And the following year is when I took the École Chocolat professional course. I think I was in the maybe third cohort ever. And so that was 10 years ago now. And after that is when I took the recipe from Bon Appetit that I had been using and adapted it and made it my own because I learned more about how to make a ganache better, and I'm still making the same flavor. It's just been adapted and changed to become a more shelf-stable professional recipe instead of something that's published widely for a home cooking situation.
Okay. And how about the bases and the ratio that you use?
So I used to start with specific ratios, but I don't anymore because I really love to play with ganache texture. And so I change the ratios depending on whether I want to make a slabbed and hand enrobed piece or if I want to do something molded. So it's, and then also, of course, depending on whether my base chocolate is dark, milk, or white and what I'm mixing it with. So I do a lot of ganaches with materials other than cream, and so if I'm using something different as the liquefier, then I change the ratio depending. So I go through a few iterations and trials of each recipe before I make it publicly available, and so I don't really have a specific ratio anymore because I like to play way too much.
So since you mentioned that you can change, of course, you can use different types of chocolate, can you tell us a little bit about how if you're using a dark chocolate or a milk chocolate and the cocoa butter, the fat content changes, how you correct for that, or how do you mix that with the cream?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, basically, dark chocolate is naturally the hardest of the three main types of chocolate, and so it needs more cream to make it soft. So lots of slab ganaches are basically a 1-to-1 ratio, full whipping cream, 36% butterfat, with the chocolate. And then milk is softer, and so if you were to add a 1-to-1 ratio chocolate to cream for a milk chocolate, it would be really runny, and you wouldn't be able to create a slab that you can cut on the guitar with it. So you have to reduce your cream down to about 3 parts chocolate, 2 parts cream.
Okay.
It's usually what I use. And then white is even softer, so I do 4 parts white chocolate to 1 part cream.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so, and Rick, how about you?
Okay, well, so the first part of the question was the first chocolate you made?
Your
Right?
first successful truffle recipe.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's digging in the crates. That goes way back, and I honestly don't even know. I mean, it all started for me back in culinary school, where you just get your feet wet with chocolate. You know, there's really, they don't go really, we didn't really go super in depth. So there's don't have the equipment there. We didn't have a guitar to cut anything on, so we did like some molded pieces. But I do remember like the first one that we made was like a brandy, it was like a milk chocolate brandy and piece, right? And each of us were kind of using a different sugar with it, and I used honey with mine, and we're just showing how the different sugars, like whether it's like tremoline or glucose or honey, whatever, how it affected the recipe. And this is like my first time, doing this stuff, and and again, that was a molded piece, so there's like the decorating part, and then there's the casting, of the shell, and then there's the cooking of the ganache, and it didn't split, it was beautiful. But then when I turned it out, and this was like the next day or 2 days later, like when we turned it out, it was just like that moment was it. It was so beautiful, and it was gorgeous. It was like the jewel. I'd say that it's like the jewel making of pastry, and it just caught me right there. So that was the first one that I ever successfully made. It wasn't my recipe. It was the one that the school gave us, but we just screwed with it. And but at the end of the day, it came together, and it was just gorgeous. But really, after that, when I really ventured out on my own, I was doing my own thing. It was just messing with recipes that I had inherited and playing with them, and a lot of trial and error. And it wasn't until much later that I stumbled upon my buddy Jerome Landry up at Barry Calabo, and just knowing him and learning his way of going about formulating the ganache. I was like, this is something that we never learned in school. They didn't teach us this, just like about ratios and areas of variables of interest that you want to look at, like sugar content, fat content, dairy fat content, cocoa butter fat content, dry content, your liquid content, and what really emulsification can bear, and then after kind of learning that, I developed these pretty impressive Excel spreadsheets that I have like right here for demonstration purposes. So down here, like my allotted windows that I allow myself, and this is just over the years, just kind of looking at the recipes that I ended up making it on my own, and seeing what I like, or how I wanted to present what I do, whether it's a cut slab ganache that I enrobe, or if it's a molded piece, just the texture that I want, how sweet I want it, how not sweet I want it, what I'm doing with, and over time, like you see a pattern develop, and there's like a window, and it's like, oh, I know my cocoa butter content. I like to stay within this range, or my my milk fat, I like to stay within this range, and I've met a few of the guys that do it like that, and they have their opinions, and I have mine, and as long as it doesn't split and it and it comes together, then it's a beautiful thing. But that's really how I swing it.
And out of those, do you have a favorite one?
I do. Yeah, I think I do. There's I don't really know exactly what the exact ratio for that piece particularly is, but I have a real affinity for my Mexican uh, chocolate that I do. It's just a single origin piece from Mexico, and it's just beautiful. I mean, I love it. It comes together so nice. It's freaking gorgeous. But that is that's one that we cut for the guitar and Roby. That's
Yeah.
probably my favorite.
It sounds delicious.
It's just so good.
So
That and the whiskey. The whiskey is just awesome. When we cut the whiskey and the pieces, the side pieces come off the guitar, we snack on them. It's like I wish we didn't even have to enrobe it. I just love the ganache straight up like that. It is so good.
Wow.
The whiskey of the Mexican.
So cream is the traditional liquid, right? That's used for the ganache. I'm going to take that question back to Giorgio, because you can really use any other liquid that substitutes the milk. So you could use, the cream. You could use butter and milk. You could use coconut milk. You could use a variety of other things. Do you work with anything other than cream in your recipes?
Yes, I work also with spirits, liqueurs, butter maybe, and also you can use juice, no, but fruit juice, okay? But I think everything matters in fact of the formulation of your ganache. You have to make a ganache that is very well balanced, using any liquefier you need or you want for having a good flavor and a good texture in the ganache. No, it's very important. You can use any liquefier you want, but you have to respect the quantities. Also, checking the quality assurance, the keeping limits, the shelf life is very important in a ganache.
Okay. And you mentioned using fruit flavors. Amy Jo, you are making fruit-flavored ganaches. So are you using juices to make the ganache? Are you using fruit puree? Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, I do a couple. Actually, I use the fruit, whatever's in season. I just use the fruit, and actually, I learned this from Rachel. Taking the fruit and boiling it to basically kill any preservatives from it, and using that as my base. But just something to add quick about the other using anything else besides cream in your ganache. I just got back from the Italy program, and we visited the Verino, and the majority of his ganaches actually are water-based, and so he's not using cream. He's using water, and it was really interesting to taste it because while they still gave you the mouthfeel of the silky, creamy feel to the initial taste, it was interesting how your aftertaste went away very quick. And it didn't hold it the same as having something with a little bit more fat on your palate. And it was interesting that there was 7 of us, and we all came out with the same thing independently. Because one, that was actually new to me to actually, use water. I've done it with olive oil, but just solely using water and seeing how it came out. It was really an interesting play. So just a little tidbit to add to that previous question.
Who are you with? You cut a little bit when you were saying that.
I'm sorry?
Who were you with when you were learning about this?
It was the Italy program for the Master Chocolatier program.
Okay.
Chocolate.
Okay, you just cut a little bit there. So Giorgio, I'm going to take it back to you because you were making, and I'm going to read this so I don't get it wrong, the Nuevo Bonbon con Ganache de Vino Tinto Zinfandel, which is a ganache. It's a mouthful. Which is a ganache with Zinfandel red wine. Can you tell us more about that recipe and how you've developed it?
Okay. First of all, I decided to use Zinfandel wine from a good quality, and for making this ganache, I also try to choose a chocolate that have the same tasting notes as the wine. For example, the Zinfandel wine have like berry notes, raspberries, red fruits. So I have to choose chocolate that has the same nose. And why? Because I want to enhance the flavors in the ganache. So both can help each other. No? And by the other side, I decided using alcohol, a little bit of edible alcohol, because the alcohol, it's like transporting the aromas in your mouth, okay, to your nose. So it's going to help. It's going to help to feel more the aromas of the Zinfandel and the chocolate. And I also use some spices and orange juice for this ganache because I was inspired in the glögg. A glögg is a drink that is very popular in Europe, and they drink it hot because they boil it with the spices and the orange. So I decided to make the same type of recipe in my ganache, and it was excellent. No, everybody liked it, and you can feel the wine, the Zinfandel wine, and the chocolate. So I think this is a ganache very special, and I work it with a dark milk chocolate. I do not like wine with bitter chocolate because it's too strong, no, both ingredients. So a dark milk helped me a lot to make it more soft, and the wine can be felt, sorry, no, in this case.
Did you have to drink a lot of wine to be able to
Oh,
pair that?
Oh yes, for sure. But it was
That's
great.
great.
But it was great.
And Rick, I noticed that you're also making a white chocolate vanilla vodka ganache. How do you balance those flavors so that they don't overpower each other?
Right. Really, like with that piece in particular, you know, vanilla's just a ingredient that has a lot of very, obviously, like very light flavor. These like very volatile little notes to them, and vodka is something that can be super harsh. So yeah, it's a balancing act. But I think that the marriage of the vodka and the vanilla is a beautiful pairing together. And I do that piece with a white chocolate that's more so. More of a canvas to work with. I think a dark chocolate with that particular piece would just be overpowering, and you would kill those volatile little notes. So it's just really a balancing act, and I mean the ganache has to come together, it has to emulsify. So you know all the ratios got to be there, but I also have to be able to sell it to my customers. So you know, let's take the whiskey piece for example that I referred to. You know that's like a punch in the mouth. You know when it's up front. But then it ends so beautifully, and that's how I see whiskey, though. You know, like you take a shot of whiskey, it's like cross your eyes, and then that aftertaste is what I love, and I want that piece to do that. So the vanilla vodka piece that we do is really just the opposite. The vodka is really in the background, but you get all the vanilla notes. It's just a very nicely balanced piece. But I really don't have a formula for the way I really go about doing it. It's just kind of a case by case basis for the alcohol that I'm using with the particular you know other flavors involved and with the chocolate. And like Giorgio said, to pick out to select a chocolate that's going to complement it too, or just stay in the background and let the other ingredients shine.
And I'm sort of curious to know, the liquor laws in the U.S. are very strict.
Right.
So do you have a limit that you can work with in terms of how much alcohol you use or how you create that concoction?
Yeah, I mean, I hope like you know people aren't law enforcement aren't watching this because I honestly don't know. I don't know what the law is. I don't. I just do what I do, and that's it. No one's come looking for me yet, so I'm not sure what they are. I don't know, but I don't cook it. What's that?
Oh yeah, you're fine. It's like 1% of like your net weight.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, thank you. That's good to know. I'll know how to lie.
Can I add something to that?
So none of it's cooked out. I mean, it all goes in after the emulsification. I don't think any of my alcohol pieces, you know, have any cooked alcohol in them. It's always added after I emulsify the ganache and the liquor's added. So it's all there.
Rachel, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, it's where I live here in Vancouver, British Columbia. We're a bit known for our antiquated liquor laws, just in general. But when it comes to food, there's actually no limit. So I actually have it in writing from my provincial government and my national government that I can put as much booze into chocolate as I want. And I think I could even sell like chocolate shot glasses full of alcohol as long as I called it a food and not a drink. So it's a bit ridiculous over here, and I always feel like, particularly when I'm reading, I'm the tutor for École Chocolat, so I read all of the assignments, and so when I read about students developing recipes and having to worry about the laws, I always feel really fortunate that like my gin truffle can be chock full of the stuff. So, yeah, it's pretty good.
Wow. That is interesting to see how they compare, how the two countries compare in that. Amy Jo, you were just at the École Chocolat Masters Chocolatier program in Italy, and I've heard that you love the old Milano Truffle recipe. Can you tell us why did that one recipe have an importance to you, and how you intend to recreate it and, you know, add your own personality to it and bring it to life?
Yeah. You know, how I said earlier, you know, for me, choosing the Italy program was ties to my branding. And I am a traditionalist when I look at my truffle line or my bonbon line. And like I said, I'm playing on some sort of Italian ingredient or some Italian theme. So for me, the Old Milan truffle, you know, really, it's a, you know, a dark chocolate center, you know, your traditional dark chocolate, you know, and then they've added butter, but they add to it lemon peel or orange peels. You can add lemon peel. We did raisins soaked in a specific rum. There was a little bit of brittle in it, as well as some pistachios. So it had, when you did it, kind of was like that, from just my family, that like fruit cake feeling, but it was like beyond better because it's all chocolate. So that, for me, because of my heritage, that's why that product stood out to me so much. And it reminds me of, there's a specific cookie. It was a Gucci Dada cookie. It's a fig cookie, and it actually had that similar tones in it, only, you know, with the raisin. So for me, it's something that I'm definitely going to add into my line. And it's just an interesting take on just a very simple traditional truffle.
Keep us posted when you do have it ready. Yeah. So let's talk, we've talked about flavors and recipe development. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about shapes and methods of covering the ganache. The classic truffle, as I said in the introduction, is shaped kind of like a truffle, the fungus truffle. But chocolatiers also use different techniques such as enrobing and molding. Rachel, you use enrobing, right?
Primarily, although I'm experimenting more and more with molding all the time. So
Okay.
I'm just in the process of diversifying my line a bit. But for my first 5 years, all of my pieces were cut, slabbed, hand enrobed.
So can you tell us a little bit why you use enrobing?
Well, it started because I was really poor. And I could either afford a guitar or like just a couple molds. And so I bought, and I don't have a lot of space. My kitchen is 140 square feet. So it's really small. So storing molds was going to be difficult. And so I actually just guitar cut everything so that I could just become kind of a master at that. And so we still do hand enrobe all of our pieces. We have no enrobing line, and so it's all one at a time here. And then last year I inherited a mold collection from a local chocolatier that was moving away from town. And so I started playing with molding more because I inherited about 400 professional quality molds from her. So it was a lot. And so now, like, I felt like I could, like, financially afford the equipment. I have a bunch of it in storage because I can't even use all of it. And some of it's not my style. I'll probably put it online and sell it. But, but for now, I mean, we do some molding, some hand enrobing, a little bit of everything. The only thing we don't do, actually, is the traditional cocoa powder coated truffle. So, and
Wow.
that's mostly to avoid a mess in the box. Cocoa powder is messy,
So
and
nice.
it messes up all the beauty of the rest of your pieces.
So, with all the experience that you have had with enrobing, we know that working with ganache at room temperature is difficult because it's very soft. Have you developed tricks or any tips that you have that have helped you enrobe perfectly?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely start with a firmer ganache than a lot of people do. So, like when I was just at the École Chocolat program in France last year, and well, earlier this year, and the French ganaches are way softer than what I do. I really like firm up my centers, and I do that because it's actually, in my first couple years of business, it was a really positive feedback that I got from my customers, saying that they really liked that it had like a bite to it, like they felt like it was solid and like felt substantial to them, I guess. And so now we play with some that are softer, particularly milk and white chocolates. But I prefer to leave my softer ganaches, more liquid ganaches, for molding, and then I make my slab ganaches just a little touch harder. Another thing that I do that I learned in Europe was to firm up, like once you get your flavor balance right in a chocolate or in a ganache, if you want to firm it up without changing the flavor balance, you just add a little bit of extra cocoa butter, just plain cocoa butter, into the recipe, and it allows you a little bit more control over the texture without altering your flavor balance. So it's particularly good for delicate flavors. So if you have a light floral or a light liqueur, something that's not going to come out really strongly over top of chocolate, you can use cocoa butter to kind of make up the texture without compromising the flavor.
Oh, wow. I'm going to try that the next time I make it. I'll let you know how it goes. And Giorgio, going back to your Zinfandel ganache, you're putting that into a molded shell. How come?
Why I use a molded shell? Well, first of all, because I like to paint chocolates.
Okay.
I like the ending, no, because it shines. You can express colors of the fruit. I don't know, anything you can imagine, you can paint it. And another reason that is very important is, for example, if I have a ganache that is a little bit soft and I cannot hold it in shape, maybe a mold can receive it well, okay, and I can encapsulate it perfectly, so I don't need to make a truffle, only a bonbon in this way. And the other reason I use mold is because, well, first of all, you can make cereal, a lot of quantities quickly. The truffles, when you make it, it has a previous process. You have to pipe it and you have to roll it. I don't know. And another important thing is the conservation. The issue that it is in the ambient, the truffles, and it's like exposing a little bit more in contamination than in bonbons. Because in bonbons you only put it in a piping bag and you deposit in a cavity, in a shell of chocolate. And in the truffle you have a previous process and you're exposing a little bit your truffle to contamination in the ambient. So I think in mold you have that benefit, and truffle is a little bit more risky about that.
Okay. And Amy Jo, you are actually using both methods, right? What are some of the reasons that you use one over the other?
Well, it's really based on cost.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to showcase all of my, technical skills. So, basically having some enrobing and having some molded. I can't afford a guitar right now, so anything that's enrobed, I do have to hand cut. And I do have some capability in storage, so that's why I got molds as well. So, for me, some of it's personal preference. It's what you can afford at a certain time, wherever your business is at. It's personal style. If you want, I know, okay, I have a fennel, ganache, and I know that I want to have a roasted fennel seeds on top of it, then it's probably going to be an enrobed piece, and so I'll go accordingly. you know, it's your presentation. How do you want to decorate it? You know, what when you're coming up with, you know, that bonbon truffle, or, you know, how do you envision it, and going from there. So for me, it's really just showing a showcase of talent and skill set, but also cost and what you can afford.
Yeah, and finding the equilibrium between all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we also all know that ganache can be a very difficult child to work with. It can curdle, it can split. And Rick, can you take this and tell us a little bit about the challenges that you were faced with, and maybe how you've overcome these?
I don't know ganache splits. It's you know, it's just a matter of you know, minding all of your little variables. You know, if you're you know, your recipe's out of balance or not. I think that's a big one. And temperatures. You know, mixing it too hot, mixing it too cold, and you know, some are just like a wrestle. You know, and it's mostly the new recipes that are the most problematic. It's your first time around. You know, and I can use my base that I my base build. You know, and I'll do that, and then I plug that into my spreadsheet, and I'll see all my levels are just right. I'm like, yeah, I'm within all these little windows here. And then when you go live, you know, you cast you know, fate into the air and chocolate into your frames, and hope that it turns out, you know, and you do everything right, and it can still split. And you're like, well, what's going on, you know, and you know, I found like some chocolates are more acidic than others, and you wouldn't even know it, you know, going into it. And so, you know, that can be a challenge too, and that can be remedied by maybe the addition of some baking soda into the recipe to help balance out the pH. You know, I can be making like pataphory, you know, with more, you have these different acidities in your fruits, you know, and some apple juice can balance some things out. It's just about balancing things out. In the Goldilocks syndrome, you know, it's like can't be too hot, can't be too cold, and it's gotta be just right. So that's really it. I mean, you know, I have one of my employees here. You know, she was from the culinary school, and she's, you know, still getting her feet under her and learning. But we got to the point where I can, you know, hand you know, the cooking part off to her, and you know, she'll still, you know, come to like, oh my God, you know, what happened here? And look at them like, well, you know, did you cook it to the same temperature? Well, yeah, I did this, that. Yeah, but I'm not standing there looking over her shoulder. I don't know what happened, but you know, I know that if you get it down and you mind your temperatures and you know you scale everything right, it should turn out just fine. But getting to that point and minding all those little variables is really what needs to be done.
So I think the common theme that I've heard through all of your answers is that it's trial and error. You got to get your hands dirty, really try out the recipe that you are interested in, and figure out the variables. What works for you, what works for the chocolate, what works for the cream that you're using, which can change. Even the cream fat can change, right? So great. Thank you for all those tips. And we do have one question that came in, so I'm going to ask that, and whoever wants to answer, please feel free to answer. And here it is. What processing equipment do you use to mix the cream to the chocolate? Do you add the cream in increments of 3, 4, or 5 times, or do you add it all at once?
Ooh, I can address that.
Okay.
It depends on the season, actually, for us. During the summer, we go down to half batches of our bonbons, and just so that they're kept fresh when we're a little bit slower for sales. And so then we mix it all by hand, and we use the method that Valrhona teaches, which is that you add your cream in small increments until the ganache breaks, and you keep stirring until then it comes together again. So you actually watch your ganache split and then come back together in a perfect emulsification, which is really nice for small quantities. Large quantities, we use a food processor, which basically does the same thing, only it does it in the processor, and you just can't, well, we can't see it in ours because it's a stainless steel thing, stainless steel bowl. We have a nice.
You also add it in increments?
No, then we do it all at once because what happens in the RoboCoupe, or if you have a big, like a nice industrial sized processor, is that the additional heat from the friction of the blades will bring your emulsification together if your fat and water balance is correct. So if you blend it and you still don't have it emulsified, then you probably have a problem with your ratio. And so it's a really easy way to actually tell if your recipe is okay or not, because the friction of the blades works so quickly that it helps maintain your temperature of stirring. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody have other inputs?
I really just use a RoboCoupe Blitzer too, and that's just it's a beast, you know, that can liquefy nuts, and that's how we make our praline and all that. But yeah, that's how we mix it. You know, if I'm doing a small, like just like one frame worth, I'm doing an experimental batch or something, we'll use a handheld one. It's like a burr stick. But yeah, but when you go to the Blitzer, you know, like Rachel was saying, it generates so much heat. You gotta take that into consideration, you know. So your temperature will change. You're cooking your cream too. So as we run the risk of splitting it. But yeah, and then if it's warmer, you know, and when it comes out of there and you pour it, it's gonna set softer ultimately. You know, if it comes out cooler and it's gonna set harder. You know, so temperature is everything when it comes to the final thing. But yeah, we just use a Blitzer, and that's pretty much it. But everything's so expensive. I'd love to have a Stefan. That'd be awesome. But that's so much money. The Blitzer alone was like, you know, $2,000, something like that. It's, I don't know. You can't cough without spending $5,000. You know.
Yeah.
Everyone wants a Stefan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Patrick Roger, when I was there, he had one like the size of a jacuzzi. It was ridiculous.
Oh, his is insane. It's insane. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for replying to that. And unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I am going to ask you to give your words of wisdom to those listeners who are looking to make their own truffles at home or at their business. Rick, do you want to kick off?
Okay, words of wisdom. I'm gonna beat a dead horse. You keep saying it. You know, put in the work. Do your mind all your temperatures. Mind your variables. You know, do the math every single time. You know, look at your overall weight of your recipe, and you know, look at your fat content of your cream you're using, fat content of your butter you're using, and do all the math and see like what the fat content is of your dairy, what the fat content is of your cocoa butter, the total fat content of both of those. If you're switching up and using like olive oil or whatever, same thing. You have to know all these things. You know, the water content of your glucose even, or your trimline or your honey, and knowing all your variables. And bugging your if you're not making your own chocolate, bugging the companies that you get it from, your supplier, to get the cut sheets and seeing all your like the sugar content and the cocoa butter content, you know, because what's written on the box is kind of deceptive. You know, that's really not like the number. You know, you got to look really at that at their spec sheets to see what the numbers really are, and just do the math. And over time, you know, you'll see your own windows that you prefer. You know what you like. You know what you want to make, and it'll start to present itself to you. And but you gotta put in the work to do it. So good luck.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, Amy Jo, how about you?
I have be patient,
Okay.
do the math, and have fun.
Those are great. Thank you. Giorgio?
Well, I can say practice, more practice, because in the time you're going to learn more and more and more. Also, you have to have a good emulsification, respect the temperatures, and have fun.
Yeah, have fun. Thank you. And Rachel?
I have a much more intuitive process, and I think it's just like play and then taste things. Like, taste things over and over again, and trust your own intuition. Like, if you are building a business, you have to believe that people are going to taste things the same way, not taste it the same way you do, but appreciate the way you taste things. So if you think it tastes good, you need to believe that other people are going to make it, like, believe that it tastes good too. So just trust yourself and play.
Thank you. This was a very good conversation. It was very fun. I've learned a lot. So thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I want to close with a special thank you to each one of you. So Rick Jordan from Rick Jordan Chocolatier in St. Louis, Missouri.
Thanks for having me.
Rachel Sawatsky from Cocoa Nymph in Vancouver, Canada.
Thank you, Sarah.
Giorgio DeMarini from Rosalind Chocolatier in Lima, Peru.
Okay, gracias.
And Amy Jo Padone from Valenza Chocolatier in Costa Mesa, California.
Thanks, Sarah.
We wish you much success in the holiday season. Thanks for watching, and if you end up making your own ganache out there, keep us posted so that we see what you're creating. And check out the date for our next Chocolate Masters Hangout on www.ecolechocolat.com. Have a great day.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.